Hi, all dear listeners. Welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today, I'm honored to have as my guest Monica Jasuja. She's a very important voice in the fintech scene, in the global fintech scene. So I leave it to Monica to introduce herself. Before, of course, of that, I would like to welcome you, Monica, and thank you for your time. And the idea would be, Monica, if you could please introduce yourself and tell everyone, in case they don't know you, a bit more about your background, um, how you ended up being such an important voice in the area of fintech and payments.
Thank you so much, Oriel, for the opportunity to feature on your podcast. And thank you to everyone who's joined us to listen to us. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm Monica Jasuja. I've been in FinTech and Payments for the last 18 odd years. And I joined payments before I knew what payments was. And it wasn't the celebrated FinTech or financial technology field as we know it. I started my payments career with PayPal, was there for about 8 years across 3 geographies before moving on to MasterCard in India and South Asia, managing the digital payments portfolio before moving on to strategic partnerships. My understanding of the payments ecosystem stems from, of course, knowing and understanding financial technology and working as a product lead and managing strategic partnerships in the later half of my career, which got me interested into the nuts and bolts of payments, how things work, and specifically the plumbing. It's really important because I most of the times we did not have the knowledge base that we have now, or even the ability to be able to search for everything on the internet because there was very little knowledge. So all the on hands and on job experience that I have, I started sharing on social media and probably early 2020, and that's how I developed a social profile and people got to know a little bit more about me. I still feel that I'm a learner and I continue to learn off social media and on and off social media as we speak, meeting experts. I also do a lot of speaking, and now I'm keenly engaged with both policy as well as advocacy. I do believe that the future of payments is going to be amazing.
Mhm.
The future of fintech and being able to impact people's lives is going to be even bigger. But I do believe that we all are in a phase where throwing technology at a problem may not be the answer. And we do need to work with governments, policymakers, as well as technologists all across the world to really create the impact that we so far have been promising, but it's not been realized with many large populations in the world still not having access to basics.
Actually, I'm
So I'm really interested and is really interested in learning about this. Sorry.
no. Please go ahead. No, I was going to say that I'm actually lucky enough to follow you on social media, on LinkedIn, etc. And you are always posting like very interesting stuff. So I encourage all my viewers and listeners to follow you in case they are not, because I'm sure they are going to learn a lot from you. And I think it's basically what you said now. Whenever you are in this area of fintech payments, you are always learning. I mean, even if you are an expert like yourself, it's kind of impossible to know everything because things change so fast. Things change on a daily basis. So it's this is why it is interesting to follow people like you to like keep track of all the latest updates. And regarding this, you mentioned as well the idea of money, the future of money. So I wanted to ask you, because people talk a lot about the future of money all the time, but I wanted to ask you, given that you are from India, what does the future of money in Asia look like in Asia in general, or if you want to talk about India mostly? And what are your predictions for the future? What trends are you seeing when it comes to this topic of the future of money?
So I'll have to admit that as far as Asia is concerned, the future of money in India and in our parts of the world, in Asia specifically, is going to be a mix of digital and cash. I don't think cash is going to go away soon, and it will, and I believe it should not as well. There are various reasons for it. But the hybrid nature, as well as the diversity that we find in our regions, means that there would be a significant population that continues to use cash, not because they don't want to go digital, but because they don't have the means. One has to be a little realistic here because, unlike the Western populations or even Europe, where digital payments has outpaced traditional technology, and we see cash has become obsolete. I believe that in our markets, and the healthy mix of cash and digital payments actually allows people to pay the way they want, and it makes them feel secure and makes them feel like they have options. apart from that, like I was talking to you earlier, there are going to be large areas and of both population as well as locations that will remain unaccessible or inaccessible simply because of the geographical nature of this region. So I do believe that at some point in time, we have to give up on the nature of trying to move everybody to digital and be okay. And in fact, want to make the digital citizens feel like they have trust in the ecosystem and know that they are going to be taken care of. Just like we would like the people who want to continue to use cash to not feel excluded from the digital payments ecosystem. And the other thing that I think I would love to call out here, and I would love to hear your views on this as well, is about the fact that the nature of governments as well as nationalistic fervor that we find in our side of the world is very, very high. We have a very large population of people, and mostly very young, mobile-first populations, who are used to seeing things that are local and using things that are local. So keeping this in mind, governments have been pushing for, I think in our parts of the world, we are seeing a very high nationalistic fervor and sentiment. Most of the population of our people in this side of the world happen to be sub of 30 years old, mobile first, and they have been used to local solutions. So keeping that in mind, I believe that government-based agendas and governments as well as public enterprises driving the future of digital is something that we will see both being established first in Asia and also as a playbook that I believe the world will adapt going forward.
Mhm. I agree with you, actually. I think that like technology-wise, Asia is very advanced, and I agree with the trends that you mentioned. And I think it is very interesting as well to talk about something that's been going on in India that I'm sure you know very well, right? I mean, and this is India's UPI. I mean, funny enough, I have done more than 60 episodes of my podcast, and whilst I wanted to cover this topic much before, I didn't have the opportunity. So I think it's a perfect time now with you to discuss this. UPI, standing for a Unified Payments Interface, is kind of, according to experts, right, shaping the future of digital payments in India. So I wanted to ask you, what's UPI, whether it is expanding globally or not, and why it was created. Like anything you want to share with my audience about UPI, because I think it's something like very interesting.
Absolutely. So actually, UPI has existed since 2016.
Mhm.
And every couple of months, we start seeing a lot of records being broken by UPI in this area. And specifically, anything in the world minus of China, I think UPI has pretty much showed us what a digital payment infrastructure can actually do in order to be able to move the population from primarily non-digital to now completely digital. And this is where I totally believe that the success that UPI has seen is actually going to set the precedence for a lot of different countries in the world to really understand and leverage the power of having a digital ID, of making a digital ID be the backbone of how a digital payment ecosystem can be built out. So just to set things in context, just yesterday, in fact, I had posted on LinkedIn that we had our equivalent of a Black Friday kind of opportunity in India, simply because we had about a 5-day festival celebration, and UPI touched new records, which were very high for a domestic payment network, where about 500 million, close to about 600 million transactions, 644 million transactions were processed in a single day, which is more than 500 million. Now, that is absolutely brilliant because coming from where we did about 16 billion transactions were registered for that month alone. So UPI would definitely exceed the 150 billion target that they had for the year 2024. While the target is really to process about 1 billion transactions a day, I believe that we are getting to a position and getting to a place where beyond the 300 to 500 million users of UPI, we would now start seeing the effect of UPI going beyond smartphone usage and really meant for the larger population, and therefore meets the financial inclusion goals of being accessible to everyone, including those with a feature phone or a non-smartphone, which I believe is one of the USPs of UPI. As a large payment systems to still want to invest and create product innovation for those who do not have access to the internet is brilliant. Now in India, about 90% of the people still use data, but data would is not it's not expensive either. But the important thing is that not everybody and not every place would have freely available internet all the time. Therefore, there need to be payment solutions that cater to I would say a predominantly offline world with a small amount of connectivity in the middle. And I think this is where UPI wins, because they have been innovating over the last couple of years to make such solutions be available, which there are. Secondly, as far as the global expansion is concerned, global expansion continues across key markets like UAE, Singapore, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, France, where you can pay on the Eiffel Tower if you have UPI, Mauritius, and other countries which have expressed an interest in adopting UPI. So I do believe that as a digital payments ecosystem and how to develop a digital payments ecosystem in your country, UPI sets a very good example. And India has now become a world leader in real-time payments. And I do believe that if the trajectory continues, then India will be able to outpace almost all other countries and make available UPI to other countries as well, should they wish to adopt a similar payment system.
That's very interesting. And why do you think, like, was the main reason why India created UPI? Do you think it was more to make, I mean, I know for sure there must have been like several reasons, not just one, but which ones do you think were the most interesting ones for India? Was it maybe to make payments faster, more efficient? Was it to promote financial inclusion? Which one do you think was more important, if there was any more important than the others, any reason?
I think primarily to have a domestic ecosystem of payments, as well as something which was local, built in India and made for India. But I would say the larger objective was to be able to provide a digital payment method to the billion plus Indians that we have in the country and go beyond the traditional card and other banking related methods. So banking and cards have been growing within the country at a double-digit percentage year on year. But the tectonic shift has been possible based on the UPI infrastructure with direct access to bank accounts as a payment instrument. I think that has been quite a game changer. Most Indians now have bank accounts, and the government has been pushing to provide bank accounts to every Indian, regardless of their financial status. And being able to therefore use a payment instrument on top of your basic bank instrument, I believe, has been the key to making UPI successful. Apart from that, the government has been progressively pushing the financial institutions, the NPCI ecosystem, which is responsible for creating UPI, as well as fintechs, to help in the adoption and the push towards digital. And after demonetization, which happened in 2016, where a couple of denomination of higher value notes became obsolete, the people realized that digital payment methods was very quick, very convenient, and very easy to use. But by making UPI free, what it also did was that from moving from about 6 to 8 million POS terminals, suddenly we've gone into 30 to 14 million merchants who are currently using UPI. So what that means is that the digital infrastructure that needed to be created and the push that was required has been given by such a move by the government. And of course, the ecosystem participated equally. We have the large fintechs such as PhonePe, Google Pay, Paytm, which are responsible for bringing hundreds of thousands of users into the digital payment ecosystem by not only incentivizing them through promotions, cashbacks, etc., but by making this a regular digital payment habit and by converting cash-related transactions to digital. And then merchants on the street got incentivized to use this payment method because people were spending more. In fact, a recent study also has reiterated the same point that I have made, where the findings suggest that people who use digital payment methods, specifically UPI, tend to spend higher than those who tend to spend in payment via cash. So I think this goes to show that the entire ecosystem has actually been developed at the back of this massive push, both by the government, the private, as well as the public sector, and of course our central bank, in making this payment system accessible to all.
That's very interesting. And you mentioned before as well the idea of promoting financial inclusion, which is something that I've been studying and working on for the past few years. So I wanted to ask you, not so much about UPI, because I think you already addressed how UPI can promote financial inclusion, but I wanted to ask you, what other strategies regarding the promotion of financial inclusion are taking place either in India or in the whole of Southeast Asia? What other strategies do you see, interesting ones that you think are remarkable?
So I think the first and the most interesting one is the use of a digital ID. I think India has shown to the world with a billion plus Indians, about 1.4 billion Indians now have a single instrument for identity, which is called an Aadhaar. That is the backbone of how subsidies were being passed on especially during COVID times, directly to people's bank account, cutting the middle people altogether. And India saved hundreds of thousands of dollars and were appreciated by the IMF and World Bank for their contribution to, first of all, ensuring that people did not die during COVID, specifically from lack of food or the ability to be able to earn for themselves. And secondly, for undertaking such a large, massive social subsidy program that is still continuing in order to give food and other subsidies directly to its citizens, especially those who are not able to afford this. All across Southeast Asia, I see the move towards digital identity and towards local payment systems, or at least local payment rails that are created with subsidized rates for money movement. This is needed because, like I mentioned earlier, we're a very, very diverse set of countries. Our local terrains are very difficult. We are not like the westernized world where one size fits all. And the governments have realized that in order to have this large scale, massive drives that they have to be able to mobilize people, to be able to give them subsidies, they do need to have a reliable means. And this is where enablement with bank accounts comes in. Social subsidy schemes and social schemes to create financial access are being driven directly by governments in these countries along with the central banks to provide a financial instrument to its population. So that would be the second thing. And the third thing is a massive drive to also educate. I think we normally do not focus a lot on this aspect, but many people who are um, under the poverty line or do not have the means are also the most vulnerable to theft, fraud, and other risks. Therefore, to educate them requires a massive amount of effort, which is again driven at the back of both the government and the private sector coming together to help ensure that these people are, first of all, safe, and secondly, they are kept safe in both their instrument management as well as behavior in digital or non-digital transactions. So providing the access is one thing, enabling them is the next step. And then third would be to increase and help increase the amount of money that they make because they have been digitally enabled, and to be able to take them and their services to the world, which is what a lot of these cross-border government initiated efforts that you are seeing, both in the transfer of data as well as cross-border payments, is something that you are seeing mostly emerge from Asia.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially when it comes to this last part. I think it's very interesting what you mentioned about financial education, the importance of that. I think that's indeed a very important area, which tends to be sometimes overlooked in many countries. And well, not related to that, but related to what we were discussing before, I wanted to ask you a bit about other like things that we are seeing now. For example, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. I know that India started working a few years ago on the Digital Rupee. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, what's the status of India's CBDC? And also whether you think there is a future, because we were talking before about the future of money. So do you think there is a future where we will see CBDCs, cryptocurrencies, and then these digital payment ecosystems like UPI, everything coexisting together in general? I mean, it doesn't need to be only in India, because I know regulations change in every country, but in general, do you think we will go towards this coexistence, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a great question. I personally feel that CBDCs in India and in other countries here are again being primarily driven by the government to promote the use cases of programmable currency and make it available to for specific use cases that they believe will be driven directly by them. And I truly believe that this is something that has a space within our world, and we shouldn't think about this as necessarily competing with other payment methods, but look at it as something that is already available and can be used to be able to cater to a very different use case. And this is where I think we need to draw the distinction between what CBDCs can do versus what, say, other payment rails can do versus what, say, crypto can do. And I truly believe that while India has been making inroads and we are still away from our transaction target for the year, this has also got to do with the fact that it's been a slow pilot. It was not meant to be like the China pilot or what has happened in other countries, where suddenly crypto CBDCs is the only way to pay. But the general adoption has been significant. It is associated with the next few steps, I believe, are going to be associated with specific use cases of being, say, subsidies being enabled to farmers that can be only used to spend on buying, say, crops or necessarily seeds or other material that is necessary for their agriculture, etc. And the RBI has been extremely bullish, which is our central bank, has been bullish on the CBDC experiment. And I think that that will continue to coexist with this massive surge that we are seeing. Right now, CBDC suffers from the global challenges that we see in every country associated with data transparency and I think privacy as well, because the concerns are that this would be something that will have a direct line of sight by the governments, and how much do users believe or want to share with the government is something that still needs to be worked out. But I believe that the use cases will continue to grow, and I'm more interested in not retail payments but wholesale payments, in which the blockchain related underlying technology will help governments save money, specifically on movement of large amounts of money that normally happen between governments and central banks.
I see that's very interesting, and this brings me to my next question, because whenever I talk about CBDCs, I always talk about both the internal or domestic aspect of a CBDC, using that CBDC within a certain country. But then there is like this second phase 2, as I call it sometimes, which relates to whether in the future we will see or not CBDCs becoming interoperable. Then there are, those networks like UDPN aiming for this interoperability within a few years from now. So my question would be, globally, given that we talked about the future of money before, what do you think are the main issues when it comes to cross-border payments right now at the time of speaking? Which are these issues, and how do you think those are being or can be solved?
So to be honest, as far as cross-border payments is concerned, I think the G20 has already provided the main challenges and has set up a lot of working groups to help address these challenges. Cost, transparency, efficiency, and of course, the access are all problems that need to be addressed by the payment systems and providers in those payment systems. I'm sorry, just give me a
Sure. No problem.
I'll restart. So the G20 has already set targets associated with what and to address the current challenges with cross-border payments, which happen to be cost, transparency, access, and of course reliability. So I think those continue to be challenges that cannot be addressed by one single geography or even by a region. I think they need to be addressed by a worldwide effort. So as far as cross-border payments is concerned, the G20 has already raised and set targets to make cross-border payments faster, cheaper, more transparent, and definitely more inclusive. To this goal, there are a lot of working groups that have been set up to actually help understand what the challenges are and to be able to address these challenges from a global perspective. Now, this is where I feel that, Uriel, your question was really relevant, because when we think about the future of money, we think about how CBDCs would work both within region, inside the country, outside of a geographical jurisdiction, etc., etc. And this is where things get really, really challenging, because for any cross-border payment systems to work, and this is talking basics, we do need to be able to share data. We need to be able to identify the good actors in the system and specifically weed out the bad actors in the system. With such geographical boundaries that are now being created, even with regards to data access and for all the right reasons, the question becomes, how will a local fast payment systems rail work when it starts addressing and starts catering to cross-border payments? because then the challenges become much, much more complex, even though the payment types remain the same. And this challenge gets even further and magnified and amplified when we think about that there are many types of currencies which are completely regulated and therefore cannot be within any payment ecosystem, should be managed simply by that particular jurisdiction. So when it comes to cross-border payments, there are a lot of fintechs and other providers which have made payments accessible for large pockets of population which are migratory in nature and happen to remit funds to many countries. In fact, the top 10 corridors where the largest remittances take place, India happens to be the largest remittance corridor in terms of incoming remittance, having crossed 100 billion last year. Now, most of these countries in these top 10 actually depend on these inward remittances because they form a significant part of the GDP. Therefore, if we are able to make these remittances cheaper, then it actually helps these countries because they continue to receive the funds, and it helps these populations of migratory laborers and other such workers to be able to send back money cheaper, faster, and better. However, the cost of cross-border payments is a major subject which requires a lot of work by the payment and fintech professionals all across the world, technology providers, because the cost can only come down if we are able to address the significant liquidity challenges and, of course, managing risk. The risk with cross-border payments is very high, and currently I'm seeing a lot of efforts being made in the direction to make cross-border payments almost as seamless as intra-country payments. However, I feel that we are still a long way away. And in my personal opinion, I feel that it will be a couple of years before we start seeing frameworks such as Nexus being adopted, because it's not about the challenge of adoption. It's more about the challenge of being able to integrate with a framework which is absolutely so robust and so innovative. But it requires standards to be set. It requires governments to agree. It requires regional collaboration, and all of these things take time.
My personal opinion would be similar to yours. I think that there's been an improvement in this area of cross-border payments these last few years or even decades. I think that's undeniable, but we're not still there. We're not still in a perfect situation, but I think that like the right steps are being taken to improve this area. And there is one final question I would like to ask you, and I would like to ask you from both a tech and fintech standpoint. What are the main trends that you expect for 2025? Because we saw that these last few years were, initially the year of cryptos, then NFTs, then generative AI. So each year it seems that we have like a different focus or hype. So what are the trends that you think will be key this coming year?
So my picks for next year continue to be the ones that I have observed in also my travel across Southeast Asia, specifically in the Singapore FinTech Fest, the Indonesia FinTech Expo, etc., and of course the Global FinTech Fest in Mumbai. I think the keys are going to be artificial intelligence. I think it's gone a little bit beyond hype now, with a lot of serious players trying to create a real dent in the industry by the rapid adoption of use cases. So I truly feel that it's gone beyond from being a buzzword to becoming something a bit more realistic, and beyond going from those chat messengers, etc., and chat customer based solutions to becoming more realistic in terms of adoption. So that's definitely going to be the flavor of the season even next year. What I would be most interested in is how artificial intelligence can actually help reduce costs associated with technology solutions, simply because in financial services, the cost of compliance is so high, and therefore rolling out anything takes years. If we are able to bring down that cost through innovative technology adoption, then that would be really great. The second flavor for me would be cybersecurity. I don't think there's been one single person I've ever met in the last couple of months who has stopped talking about fraud. Fraud has started increasing because as we go more digital, we also become more vulnerable and susceptible to fraudulent elements. And like I mentioned earlier, one bad actor can destroy the entire system. And restoring trust and faith in digital infrastructures, digital technology is extremely critical. So while the governments will do their job, the ecosystem will do theirs. We also need to have solutions which will stop this fraud as it happens, or at least prevent the losses that come from it, both for consumers as well as for businesses. And the third for me will be, I would say, digital technology associated with CBDC, blockchain, and I would think even crypto. I think it's time to recognize that there will be alternative payment systems that need to coexist along with traditional retail and wholesale payment systems. And we need to understand how best to use this technology to address certain use cases that still are large enough to be solved. And I think that's been, again, one of the main core areas of focus, which I've heard through the various couple of weeks that I've spent on the road. And I think those we will start to see a lot more traction in this as they go from beyond pilot stage to becoming more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for sharing those, Monica. And unfortunately, we are running out of time today, but I must say it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you for this over half an hour. I think we got to cover some very interesting topics when it comes to the future of money, cross-border payments, India's UPI, financial inclusion, the future of fintech. I mean, we covered a lot in a short period of time, and I'm sure my viewers and listeners will have learned a lot listening from you, Monica. So I would like to thank you for that and for your time.
Thank you so much, Oriel, for inviting me. And I'm so glad we finally got a chance to speak. And thank you to all the listeners who'll be listening in.
No, it's been my pleasure. And to all my listeners, well, feel free to subscribe to my channel in case you haven't. And feel free to follow Monica as well, because as I said before, she's always posting like very interesting stuff on LinkedIn and all her social media. So if you want to learn about payments and fintech, you should follow Monica for sure.
Thank you so much, Oriel.
So thank you very much and stay tuned for the next episode. See you all soon.